The scent of roast chicken filled our kitchen, a fragrant lie over the battleground where my husband thought he'd declare war on our marriage. He had no idea I was about to drop a bomb he never saw coming. The scent of rosemary and garlic from the roast chicken I'd just pulled from the oven filled the kitchen, a smell that used to mean family, comfort, and a happy end to a long day. Now, it was just a mask, a fragrant lie trying to cover the stale silence that had become the real atmosphere of our home. I placed the platter on the dining table, the one we'd picked out together 15 years ago, its polished wood surface now a vast, empty ocean between two strangers. Mark sat at the other end, not looking at the food, not looking at me. His eyes were fixed on his phone, which lay face down on the table, a dark, silent sentinel guarding his secrets. He was wearing one of his best suits, a charcoal gray one I'd bought him for our 10th anniversary. It was Tuesday. He never wore a suit like that on a Tuesday unless he had a major client dinner, but he'd been home since 6. He had showered, changed, and meticulously combed his hair, dabbing on the expensive cologne his new client had supposedly gifted him. He looked like a man preparing for a victory speech. I knew, with a certainty that had settled deep and cold in my bones weeks ago, that I was the country he was about to declare war on. I sat down, the scrape of my chair unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "Dinner's ready," I said, my voice even, betraying none of the hurricane swirling inside me. He finally looked up, his expression carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the slight tremor in the hand he rested on the table. He was rehearsing. He'd been rehearsing this moment for days, maybe weeks. He probably practiced in the car, on his drive home from her place. He cleared his throat, a small theatrical sound. "Sarah," he began, his voice taking on a formal, almost corporate tone. "We need to talk." I picked up my fork, feigning interest in a piece of roasted potato. "Okay," I said, my calmness seeming to unnerve him slightly. He expected tears, hysterics, pleading. I was determined to give him none of it. He took a deep breath, puffing out his chest. He was the CEO of our lives, about to announce a strategic downsizing. "This isn't easy to say," he continued, though his face showed no signs of difficulty, only resolve. "But I think we've both known for a while that this isn't working anymore. We've grown apart. We want different things." He paused, waiting for me to fill the silence with my predictable, wifely sorrow. I remained silent, chewing my potato slowly, his patience frayed. "What I'm trying to say, Sarah," he said, his voice sharpening with impatience, "is that I want a divorce." There it was. The bombshell he thought would shatter my world, the words he had polished like stones to hurl at me. He leaned back in his chair, his posture a study in arrogant finality, a smug little glint in his eye. He had done it. He had dropped the bomb. Now he just had to watch the fallout, the beautiful destruction of the woman he no longer wanted. I took a slow sip of water, placed the glass down with a soft click, and met his gaze directly for the first time all evening. I let a small, sad smile touch my lips. "I know," I said softly. His brow furrowed. That wasn't in his script. "You know?" I reached for my handbag, which I had placed on the empty chair beside me. My hand didn't shake. My heart wasn't pounding. It was beating with a slow, steady rhythm, the rhythm of a marathon runner who could finally see the finish line. I pulled out a thick manila envelope sealed and heavy with consequence. "I want a divorce," he declared again, louder this time, as if I hadn't heard him. "Already filed," I said, sliding the envelope across the polished wood table. It glided over the surface and came to a stop right in front of his plate. "You were served this morning, actually, at your office, but I guess you were too busy to open your mail." The color drained from his face. His carefully constructed composure shattered into a million pieces. He stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He fumbled with the clasp, his fingers suddenly clumsy, and ripped it open. He pulled out the thick stack of papers, his eyes scanning the first page, his face a kaleidoscope of confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. "What is this? When did you—" he stammered, looking up at me, truly seeing me for the first time in years. He wasn't seeing a heartbroken wife. He was seeing a stranger, an adversary who had just launched a preemptive strike. "About 3 months ago," I said, finally allowing myself to spear a piece of the chicken I had so carefully cooked. The moment I confirmed my suspicions. "You see, Mark, you're not very good at hiding things. The late nights, the sudden obsession with the gym, the way you started guarding your phone like it was a state secret. It was all a bit cliché, really." He shook his head, flipping through the pages frantically. "You can't do this. This is insane. You have no grounds." "Oh, I have grounds," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, but carrying across the table like a death sentence. "I have plenty. I have photos. I have recordings. I have copies of hotel receipts and credit card statements you thought you were so clever to open in a P.O. box. I know all about her, Mark. I know about Ashley. I know she's 26, works in your marketing department, and that you've been paying for her apartment for the last 6 months with money from our joint savings." His face went from white to a blotchy, furious red. "You hired a private investigator? You spied on me?" he roared, slamming his fist on the table, making the silverware jump. "I didn't spy," I corrected him calmly. "I conducted due diligence on my failing marital assets. And it wasn't just about Ashley, was it, Mark? It was never just about her." I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. "Let's talk about your business partner, Mr. Henderson, and the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, the ones you started funneling money into 18 months ago." His face went from red with anger to a ghostly, horrifying white. He finally understood. He hadn't just been caught having an affair. He had been caught in everything. He stared at me, his breath coming in ragged little gasps. The confident man who had sat down to announce the end of our marriage was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. "Cayman Islands, Henderson, you're insane. You're making this up," he whispered, his voice hoarse. He was trying to convince himself, not me. "Am I?" I picked up my wine glass, swirling the deep red liquid. "Let's see. The Shell Corporation is called MHS Consolidated. Clever, using your and Henderson's initials. You opened the accounts on March 14th of last year. Your first transfer was for $250,000, moved from your brokerage account under the guise of a high-risk tech investment. You covered your tracks well, I'll give you that. But you made one tiny mistake. You used our anniversary as the security password for the online portal. Romantic, isn't it? The password to the money you were stealing from our family was the date you pledged to cherish and protect it." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, and I watched them land one by one. His facade of indignation was crumbling, revealing the raw panic beneath. How could you possibly know that? You underestimate me, Mark. You always have. You saw me as the dutiful wife, the one who ran the household, raised our children, and hosted your boring work dinners. You never thought to look under the surface. While you were sneaking around with your assistant and cooking the books with your partner, I was learning. After I found the first hotel receipt, the one you so carelessly left in your gym bag, I didn't just hire a private investigator. I hired a forensic accountant, a very, very good one. His name is Mr. Gable, and he finds you fascinating. He says your attempts to hide the assets are a work of amateurish genius." You bitch," he hissed, the words spat across the table like venom. He shoved the divorce papers away from him, his hands trembling with rage. "You did this to ruin me. You were never going to let me leave, were you? You'd rather burn everything to the ground." "No, Mark," I said, my voice hardening. "You set the fire. I'm just making sure you don't walk away from the ashes with a suitcase full of our money. This isn't about revenge. This is about survival. It's about securing a future for me and for our children, a future you were actively trying to steal." He laughed then, a bitter, ugly sound that held no humor. Our children. Don't you dare bring them into this. What do you think this will do to them? A messy, public divorce? You think a judge is just going to hand you everything? I'll fight you. I will drag your name through the mud. I'll tell them you were unstable, that you were paranoid, that you drove me away with your insane jealousy. I set my wine glass down and folded my hands on the table. The time for quiet revelations was over. It was time for the terms of surrender. No, you won't. You won't fight me at all. Because Mr. Gable didn't just find the money you were hiding from me. He found where the money was coming from. It wasn't just profits from your firm, was it, Mark? He found the discrepancies in the company's main accounts, the money you've been siphoning from your investors. It's not just marital fraud. It's wire fraud. It's embezzlement. We're not talking about a messy divorce anymore. We're talking about prison time. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the faint hum of the refrigerator seemed to have died. The roast chicken sat on its platter, forgotten, its skin starting to wrinkle as it cooled. Mark's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. He finally understood the checkmate I had been setting up for months. The affair was the leverage for the divorce settlement. The fraud was the leverage for his entire freedom. "What do you want?" he finally choked out, his eyes wide and pleading. The arrogant CEO was gone. This was a man begging for his life. "It's all in the settlement agreement my lawyer drew up. It's the last document in that envelope," I told him. "But I'll summarize. I get the house unencumbered. I get sole custody of the children. You can have supervised visitation if you behave. I get 70% of all declared liquid assets and your entire retirement fund. You will also sign over the titles to both cars and the holiday cabin. You will walk away with your clothes, your personal effects, and the secret of your criminal activities kept safely between us. In return for your signature, all of Mr. Gable's findings will remain privileged and confidential. You get to avoid a federal investigation. You get to stay out of jail. It's a very generous offer, I think." He stared at me, dumbfounded. He opened his mouth to argue, to rage, to say something, anything. But before he could form a single word, the doorbell rang. A bright, cheerful chime that cut through the suffocating tension in the room like a knife. Mark flinched, looking toward the front door in confusion. "Who is that? Are you expecting someone?" I calmly glanced at the ornate clock on the mantelpiece. 7:30, right on time. I looked back at my husband, a man I now saw with perfect, terrifying clarity. A faint smile played on my lips. "That'll be your parents," I said. "I invited them for dinner. I thought since you were making such a life-altering announcement, it was only right we do it as a family." The blood drained from Mark's face so fast he looked gray under the warm dining room lights. His parents, of course. It was the perfect diabolical cherry on top of the nightmare I had so carefully constructed for him. His mother, Eleanor, who worshipped the ground he walked on, who still called him her golden boy at 45. His father, Arthur, a stoic, proud man who valued integrity and family honor above all else. The thought of confessing his sordid criminal life to them was, I knew, a punishment worse than any prison sentence I could have threatened. "You didn't," he breathed, his voice a ghost of its former arrogance. "Sarah, you wouldn't." The doorbell chimed again, a little more insistent this time. "Go on, Mark," I said, gesturing towards the hallway with my fork. "Answer the door. Don't keep your mother waiting. You know how she worries." He was frozen, trapped between the horror of the truth laid out on the dining table and the imminent arrival of the two people in the world he couldn't bear to disappoint. For a brief second, I saw a flicker of the old Mark, the one who could talk his way out of anything. He looked at the papers, then at me, then back at the door. He was calculating, searching for an escape route, a way to spin this. I crushed that hope before it could take root. "If you say one word out of line," I whispered, my voice cold and precise, One single syllable that deviates from the script we are about to play out. I will stand up, I will hand your father that envelope, and I will explain in excruciating detail how his golden boy is not just a cheater, but a common thief who is about to let his family take the fall. Do you understand me? He swallowed hard, a muscle twitching in his cheek. He gave a sharp, jerky nod. The fight was gone. I had won. He pushed his chair back, the legs scraping against the floor, and walked like a condemned man towards the front door. I could hear his forced, overly cheerful voice as he opened it. "Mom, Dad, what a surprise! Come in, come in!" A moment later, they were in the dining room. Eleanor, small and bird-like, wrapped in a cloud of Chanel No. 5, rushed to me, her cheeks rosy from the cool evening air. "Sarah, darling, you look wonderful. I hope we're not intruding. Mark was so vague on the phone. Just said to come for dinner." "Not at all, Eleanor. It's lovely to see you," I said, accepting her air kisses. Arthur followed, a solid, reassuring presence. He gave me a warm smile and a pat on the shoulder. "Smells delicious, Sarah. Is that your rosemary chicken?" "The very same," I smiled back. My performance, as seamless as Mark's, was brittle. They took their seats, Eleanor next to me and Arthur next to his son. Mark looked like he was about to vomit. He sat stiffly, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists on his lap beneath the table. Eleanor, oblivious, began to chatter. "So, what's the big occasion?" Mark sounded so mysterious. Arthur and I were guessing all the way over. I said you're pregnant again. Oh, wouldn't that be wonderful? But Arthur thinks it's a promotion. The word promotion hung in the air. Mark visibly flinched. I took pity on him, but only a little. "Well," I began, placing my napkin in my lap and looking around the table at my small, captive audience. Mark did have some news he wanted to share with everyone. 3 pairs of eyes swiveled to him. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a freight train. He opened his mouth, but only a dry, croaking sound came out. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Yes. News." Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Well, don't keep us in suspense, son." Mark looked at me, his eyes screaming for help, for a reprieve. I gave him a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of my head. I would not save him. This was his mess to deliver. He took a shaky breath. "Sarah and we've been talking a lot lately about the future." He licked his lips, his gaze darting between his parents' expectant faces. "And we've decided that our journey together has come to an end." The silence was deafening. Eleanor's smile froze, then slowly collapsed. What are you talking about? A journey? Mark, what does that mean?" Arthur's expression hardened. He looked from his son's pale, sweaty face to my own calm, composed one. He knew. In that instant, the way a father just knows, he knew this was Mark's doing. "We're getting a divorce," Mark finally managed to say, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. Eleanor let out a small gasp, her hand flying to her chest. No, I don't believe it. There must be some mistake." "Sarah? This isn't true, is it?" I met her pleading, tear-filled eyes with a look of carefully practiced sadness. "I'm afraid it is, Eleanor. We've tried, but we've just grown too far apart. We both feel this is for the best." I made sure to use the word "we," giving Mark the collaborative exit he so desperately needed in that moment. "For the best?" Arthur's voice was low and dangerous. He wasn't looking at me. His full, formidable attention was on his son. "You built a life together. You have 2 beautiful children. You don't just throw that away because you've grown apart. What have you done, Mark?" "Arthur, please," Eleanor whimpered, reaching for her husband's arm, but Arthur shook her off. "No, Eleanor. I want to hear it. I want him to look me in the eye and tell me why he is destroying his family." Mark shrank under his father's glare. He looked down at his plate, unable to meet his eyes. It's complicated, Dad." "It's not complicated," I said, my voice gentle but firm, cutting through the tension. Sometimes these things just happen. But we're both committed to making this as amicable as possible, for the sake of the children. I looked pointedly at Mark. We've already agreed on the terms of the settlement. Mark has been very generous. This seemed to placate Arthur slightly, shifting his concern to the practical. Generous? What does that mean? Sarah, you have to make sure you're protected, that the children are protected. Oh, she is, Mark muttered under his breath, a flicker of his earlier resentment breaking through. I am, I confirmed smoothly. Mark has agreed that I'll keep the house so the children won't have to be uprooted, and he's made sure we'll be very well taken care of financially. He's a good man. The lie felt bitter in my mouth, but it was a necessary part of the performance. Eleanor was now openly weeping into a napkin. The perfect family dinner was in ruins. The roast chicken sat untouched, a monument to our collective lies. I felt a pang of guilt for what I was putting his parents through, but it was eclipsed by the cold, hard necessity of it all. This was the only way. We sat in that miserable tableau for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Arthur sighed, a heavy, disappointed sound that seemed to suck all the remaining air out of the room. I need some air, he said, pushing his chair back and standing up. He walked to the French doors that led out to the back patio, opened one, and stepped out into the night. Eleanor, sniffling, looked at Mark. Go talk to your father, she ordered weakly. Fix this. Mark looked at me, a silent, desperate plea. I gave him a small nod. He got up and followed his father outside, closing the door behind him. I was left alone with my weeping mother-in-law. I went to the kitchen and came back with a box of tissues and a glass of brandy for her. As I set it down, I heard their voices through the glass Arthur's, low and angry, and Mark's, high and pleading. And then I saw it. On the floor by Mark's chair was his phone. He had left it on the table earlier, but must have knocked it off when he stood up so abruptly. It was lying face up, and the screen was lit. It had been woken by a new message. My heart gave a sudden, hard thud. I knew I shouldn't. I knew the war was already won. But the temptation, the need to see the final piece of the puzzle, was too strong. I glanced at Eleanor, who was busy dabbing her eyes. I bent down, pretending to adjust my shoe, and scooped up the phone. The sender's name was just Ashley. The message on the lock screen was there for anyone to see, a string of words that made the air freeze in my lungs and turned my victory to ice. He knows, the message read. Your dad. He just called me. He knows about the baby. The words on the screen swam before my eyes. The baby. My breath hitched in my chest, a sharp, painful intake of air. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just stolen money. It was a whole new life. A replacement life he had been building while ours was left to crumble. A baby. The final, most profound betrayal. A secret I hadn't even thought to look for. Mr. Gable and his forensic accounting, the private investigator with his grainy photos, they had uncovered the skeleton of his deception. But this was its beating heart. My carefully constructed composure, the icy calm that had been my shield and my sword all evening, cracked. For a terrifying second, I thought I was going to be sick right there on the Persian rug. The roast chicken, the wine, the years of shared memories, it all churned in my stomach like poison. I shoved the phone into the pocket of my dress, the cool glass a dead weight against my thigh. My hand was shaking. Eleanor, lost in her own grief, hadn't noticed a thing. He was always such a good boy, she murmured into her tissue, a sad, familiar refrain. A good husband, a wonderful father. I don't understand where it all went wrong. It went wrong when he decided our children weren't enough, I thought, a wave of pure, unadulterated rage washing over me. It was so potent, it almost made me dizzy. The children. My God, Lily and Tom. They were asleep upstairs, blissfully unaware that their father was not only leaving them, but had already started a new family. He wasn't just replacing me, he was replacing them. Through the French doors, I could see the tense silhouettes of Mark and his father. Arthur was doing most of the talking, his hands chopping the air in sharp, angry gestures. Mark stood with his head bowed, a penitent son receiving his judgment. But he wasn't penitent. He was just caught. And he was hiding a secret so much bigger than the ones I'd exposed. The phone in my pocket felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. Ashley's message replayed in my mind. "Your dad. He just called me." Arthur knew. He had known before he even walked through our front door. His questions, his anger. It wasn't just about the divorce. He knew about the affair. He knew about Ashley. And now, I realized with a sickening lurch, he probably knew about the baby. Mark hadn't just been summoned to dinner. He'd been summoned to an execution, and I had unknowingly hijacked the proceedings. My mind raced, reevaluating everything. The settlement agreement in the envelope suddenly felt flimsy, inadequate. It was designed to punish a cheating, thieving husband. It wasn't designed for a man who had created a shadow family, a man who had a whole other set of obligations he was about to prioritize over my children. The 70%, the house, the retirement fund, it was no longer enough. It was a pittance in the face of this ultimate deceit. Arthur and Mark came back inside, the cold night air rushing in with them. Arthur's face was grim, set like granite. Mark looked utterly defeated, his eyes red-rimmed. He wouldn't look at me. He couldn't. "Eleanor," Arthur said, his voice heavy with authority. "We're leaving. Mark will call you tomorrow." Eleanor looked up, confused. "But we haven't eaten. What did you two talk about? Did you fix it?" "There's nothing to fix," Arthur said, his gaze flicking to me for a brief, unreadable moment. It wasn't a look of sympathy, but one of grim acknowledgement. We were, for tonight, unlikely allies in the dismantling of his son. He helped his wife to her feet, and they made their way to the door in a fog of unspoken words and quiet misery. I saw them out, offering empty platitudes about driving safe. As Arthur passed me in the doorway, he paused. "You're a strong woman, Sarah," he murmured, so low only I could hear. "Don't let him bully you." Then he was gone. I closed the door and leaned against it, the lock clicking shut with a sound of profound finality. We were alone again, just me and the stranger who was my husband. He was standing by the dining table, staring at the congealed food. He looked exhausted, as if the last hour had aged him a decade. "Happy now?" he asked, his voice a ragged whisper. "You got what you wanted. You humiliated me in front of my parents. You've bled me dry. You've won." "I haven't won anything, Mark," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. I walked slowly back toward him, each step measured and deliberate. I stopped at the head of the table, where I had sat just an hour ago, feeling so powerful, so in control. "This isn't a game." "Isn't it?" he shot back, a spark of defiance returning. "Felt like one. You had all your pieces lined up, didn't you? The PI, the accountant, my parents. It was a perfectly executed little ambush." "An ambush is what you call a surprise attack," I countered. "You declared war first. You just didn't expect me to be armed." I pulled his phone from my pocket and placed it on the table between us, the screen dark. "You dropped something." His eyes widened in panic as he recognized his phone. He snatched it up, his thumb moving frantically over the screen, checking his messages, his call log, his entire secret life. He looked up at me, his face a mixture of fear and fury. "You went through my phone?" "I didn't have to," I said, my voice like ice. "Ashley's message popped right up on the lock screen. You really should be more careful with your operational security, Mark. It's sloppy." His last wall of defense crumbled. There was nowhere left for him to hide. The shame, the guilt, the sheer terror of total exposure washed over his face. "Sarah, I was going to tell you." "When?" I demanded, my voice rising for the first time. "When were you going to tell me? After the divorce was final? When you were moving into a new house with her? Or were you going to let the kids find out they had a new half-sibling when they saw the announcement on social media? When, Mark? I don't know, he yelled, running his hands through his hair. I didn't know how. It's a mess. It's more than a mess, I said, leaning forward, my hands flat on the table. It's a material change in circumstances. The deal we discussed, the one in that envelope, it's off the table. He stared at me, bewildered. What? No, you can't. We had an agreement. You said you wouldn't. He trailed off, the threat of prison hanging unspoken in the air. I said I wouldn't expose your fraud if you signed the papers, I clarified, and I won't. But the terms of that signature have just been renegotiated by you, a baby, Mark. That's not just another expense. That's a legacy, a whole new branch of the family tree, and it's going to be provided for, just not with my children's money. He looked at me, a glimmer of hope dawning in his panicked eyes. He thought this was just about money. He thought he could buy his way out of this, too. Okay. Whatever you want. More money, a bigger percentage? Name it. Just let's sign the papers and be done with this tonight. I let a slow, cold smile spread across my face. He still didn't get it. He still thought he was in a negotiation. Oh no, I said softly. We're not signing anything tonight. You see, I'm not just renegotiating our divorce, Mark. I'm taking over your entire life. I walked over to the thick manila envelope and picked it up. He watched me, confused, as I walked to the fireplace, where a low fire I'd lit earlier was still glowing. What are you doing? He asked, his voice trembling. The old plan is void, I said, and without another word, I tossed the entire envelope, the divorce petition, the evidence, the meticulously crafted settlement, into the flames. The paper curled, blackened, and then burst into a bright orange blaze. Mark stared, aghast. Why would you do that? That was your leverage. That was everything. I turned to face him, the firelight dancing in my eyes, casting flickering shadows across my face. That was leverage to get a divorce from a cheating husband, I said, my voice filled with a chilling new sense of purpose. I have a different plan now, a better one. You see, Mark, I'm not going to divorce you. He looked at me as if I'd just announced I could fly. What are you talking about? You hate me. Oh, I do, I confirmed, with every fiber of my being. But a divorce is too easy. It lets you off the hook. It lets you run away and start your shiny new life with Ashley and your new baby, paying your penance from a distance. No, that's not nearly enough. I took a step closer to him, my eyes boring into his. You're not going anywhere. You're going to stay here, in this house, in this marriage. And every single cent you earn, every bonus, every dollar you ever hope to hide is going to be funneled directly into an irrevocable trust for Lily and Tom. You will work for your original children. And as for Ashley, I paused, savoring the moment. You're going to break up with her tonight. And if you ever see or speak to her again, a complete copy of Mr. Gable's report lands on the desk of the U.S. Attorney. Welcome to your new life, husband. The prison you've built for me is now yours. Mark stared at me, his face a canvas of disbelief and horror. The fire in the hearth crackled, consuming the last remnants of my old plan, the ashes of a simple divorce fluttering up the chimney. He thought I was bluffing, that this was some new, hysterical tactic born of pain and rage. He was wrong. The rage was there, a cold, dense star in the center of my being, but this wasn't hysteria. It was glacial, calculated clarity. You're crazy, he stammered, shaking his head. Completely insane. That's not a plan, it's a prison sentence. No judge would ever enforce that. They'll grant me a divorce. Will they? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Let's imagine that, shall we? You file for divorce. I contest it. I file a motion for discovery demanding a full accounting of your finances. My forensic accountant, Mr. Gable, will be subpoenaed. He'll have to present his findings about MHS Consolidated and the Cayman accounts under oath. Your investors will get wind of it. The SEC will get curious. Your father, who values his reputation above all else, will be dragged into it. You won't just be divorced, Mark. You'll be disbarred, disgraced, and destitute. And that's before the criminal charges. So go ahead. File for divorce. I dare you." Every word was a nail in the coffin of his freedom. He could see the logic, the cold, inescapable trap I had laid. His affair and his new baby were no longer the issue. They were merely the fuse that had lit the real bomb. His financial crimes. He had given me the perfect weapon, and I was now pressing it to his temple. He sank into a dining chair, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a hollow, profound despair. "You would do that? You would stay married to me, live in the same house just to punish me?" "Punish you?" I let out a short, mirthless laugh. "Oh, Mark, you still think this is about you. This is about Lily and Tom. This is about securing their future, a future you were willing to sacrifice for your sordid little midlife crisis. You will work. You will earn. And your children, our children, will be the beneficiaries. You will be their employee. This house won't be our home. It will be your gilded cage. We will live separate lives under one roof. We will be polite for the children's sake. In public, we will be the perfect couple, weathering a rough patch. But when we are alone, you will remember every day that I own you." He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. Whether with rage or grief, I couldn't tell, and I didn't care. I felt nothing. The love I once had for him had been burned out, leaving behind only the cold ashes of resolve. "The phone," I said, my voice sharp. "Call her, now. I want to hear it." He looked up, his eyes pleading. "Sarah, please, not like this. Let me just—" "Now, Mark," I commanded, my tone leaving no room for argument. With trembling fingers, he picked up his phone. He swiped through his contacts, his thumb hovering over her name. He pressed the call button and put it on speaker. It rang twice before she picked up, her voice young and anxious. "Mark, oh my God, what did your father say? Is everything okay?" Mark looked at me, his face a mask of misery. I gave him a slight encouraging nod. He cleared his throat. "Ashley," he began, his voice cracking, "listen to me. It's over." "What? What do you mean, it's over?" Her voice was laced with confusion and rising panic. "Mark, what's going on? You were supposed to tell her tonight. We had a plan." "The plan has changed," he said, the words sounding wooden, rehearsed. He was reading from my script now. "I'm not leaving my wife. I'm not leaving my family. We're going to work things out." A sob caught in her throat. "What about the baby? What about our family? You promised me, Mark. You promised." "There is no us," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He was looking at me, his eyes dead. "It was a mistake. I'm sorry. Don't contact me again." Before she could respond, before her sobs could turn into furious questions, he ended the call. He tossed the phone onto the table, the clatter loud in the silent room. And then he broke. He slumped forward, his head on the polished wood of the dining table we had picked out together so long ago, and he wept. He cried for his lost love, for his unborn child, for the life he thought he was about to begin. He did not cry for me, or for the family he had already broken. The weeks that followed were the strangest of my life. Mark was a ghost in our home. He moved into the guest room. We spoke only when necessary, our conversations limited to the logistics of the children's schedules. He went to work. He came home. He transferred his entire salary, minus a small, pre-agreed living allowance, into a new account that only I controlled. My lawyer drew up the paperwork for the irrevocable trust, and Mark signed it without a word, his face pale, his hand shaking. He was a model prisoner. But the atmosphere in the house was suffocating. Lily and Tom, sensitive and smart, knew something was wrong. The silence was louder than any fight we'd ever had. They became withdrawn, their laughter less frequent. I had won the war, but I was in danger of losing everything that mattered in the process. My victory felt as hollow as my husband's eyes. One evening, about 2 months into our new arrangement, I was tucking Lily into bed. "Mommy," she asked, her small voice tentative, "why is Daddy so sad?" The question struck me harder than any of Mark's betrayals. I was so focused on punishing him, on protecting my children's financial future, that I hadn't considered the emotional cost of keeping this broken man in their daily lives. I was teaching them that this was what a marriage looked like: two silent, unhappy people living in a beautiful cage. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs and found Mark in his office staring at a spreadsheet on his computer, the numbers a meaningless blur. "This isn't working," I said from the doorway. He looked up, startled. "I'm doing everything you asked. The money is all there." "I'm not talking about the money," I said, walking into the room. "I'm talking about this, us. The children, they're miserable. They'd rather have a happy father living somewhere else than a miserable one haunting their home." A flicker of something hope maybe appeared in his tired eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying my plan was flawed," I admitted. "It was born of anger. It secured their finances, but it's poisoning their childhood. My children deserve better. They deserve a chance at happiness, and so God help me do you." I took a deep breath. "The trust is irrevocable. That doesn't change. You will support your children, all 3 of them." He flinched at the mention of 3, but nodded. "I'll have my lawyer draw up new divorce papers," I continued. "The original terms, the house, custody, the assets, you'll sign them. You will be free to go, Mark. But the evidence of your financial crimes stays with me. It will be my insurance policy forever. If you ever miss a single payment, if you ever cause any trouble for me or the children, the U.S. Attorney gets a very interesting package. Are we clear?" He stood up, his face a complex mixture of shock, relief, and something that looked almost like gratitude. "Sarah, why?" "Because my daughter asked me why you were so sad," I said, my voice thick with emotion for the first time in months. "And I realized I would rather be a divorced single mother to happy children than the warden of a miserable man. My victory doesn't have to be your complete destruction. My victory is my freedom. It's my children's happiness. Go. Build a life. Be a decent father to all your kids. That's all I ask." He just nodded, unable to speak. For the first time, I saw a glimmer of genuine remorse in his eyes. He finally understood. It had never been about the money. It had been about the family he had so carelessly broken, and the one I was determined to save, even if it meant letting him go. As I walked out of the room, leaving him to his newfound freedom, I didn't feel like I had lost. I felt like I had finally, truly won.